At Fort Novosel, Alabama, they renamed it from Fort Rucker in '22. A CH-47 Chinook sits inside the Army Aviation Museum with a placard that reads like a typo. This single airframe recovered 11,000 downed aircraft in Vietnam. Not this model. This helicopter, 68-15-414. One tandem rotor cargo ship hauled back more broken machinery than most depots ever processed. The number sounds wrong because it should be. No single aircraft belongs in a sentence with 11,000. But the Chinook's service records back it up, and the Army's own historical office at Cairns put the recovered airframe value north of $3.5 billion in 1971 money. Adjusted, that figure climbs past $26 billion. One helicopter, paying for itself 1,000 times over by dragging wrecked Hueys, Cobras, and observation birds out of triple canopy jungle that no road could reach and no truck could navigate. Drop a comment and tell me what you already knew about the Chinook's recovery mission in Vietnam. Subscribe if you want the full story. Hit like if anything in the next 15 minutes surprises you, and I suspect it will. The premise borders on absurd when you say it plainly. The only vehicle that can rescue a downed helicopter is another helicopter. A fixed wing can't hover over a crash site in a riverbed. A truck can't reach a ridgeline in the Central Highlands. A ship can't climb to 4,000 feet. So the Army sent its biggest, ugliest, most overloaded rotary wing aircraft into landing zones, still taking fire to sling-load broken airframes that weighed 5,000 pounds and hung beneath the fuselage like dead weight in a crosswind. The crews called these missions pipe smoke. The after-action reports used a different word, uninsurable. Boeing Vertol never set out to build a recovery aircraft. They set out to build a truck with rotors, and the Army kept telling them the truck was too big. The original specification, dated 1959, called for an all-weather medium transport helicopter, capable of hauling 2 tons internally, or slinging external loads on a single cargo hook. Frank Piasecki's engineers in Morton, Pennsylvania, they'd been building tandem rotor machines since the late 40s, delivered a prototype designated the UH-1 Bravo. The Army's Aviation Board at Fort Rucker tested it through '61 and came back with a complaint that reads almost comically now. The aircraft, they wrote, exceeds the dimensional and weight parameters suitable for routine airmobile operations. Their word, routine. The Chinook struck them as too much helicopter for a battlefield that still moved on jeeps. Piasecki had sold the company to Boeing by then, and Boeing's response amounted to a shrug. They kept the tandem rotor layout. They kept the rear loading ramp. They widened the fuselage to 92 inches across and hung 2 Lycoming T-55 turboshafts on pylons above the cabin, each producing 2,800 shaft horsepower. Empty, the CH-47 Alpha weighed just under 19,000 pounds. Maximum gross takeoff hit 33,000. The rotor disc area, 2 overlapping 60-foot circles, threw a downdraft that flattened elephant grass at 200 yards. You feel a Chinook before you see it. That's not poetry. Standing beneath one at hover, the rotor wash pins your shirt flat against your chest, fills your ears with a layered thudding that vibrates your sternum, and kicks up enough debris to sandblast exposed skin. CW2. Larry Brown, who flew recovery missions out of Phu Loy in '68, put it bluntly in a letter home. The locals scatter when we come in low. I don't blame them. It sounds like 2 freight trains arguing. The Army wanted something smaller, something manageable, something that fit the doctrine written for a European war against Soviet armor columns. Vietnam had no interest in European doctrine. The smell hit you first, aviation fuel and burnt wiring and wet jungle rot, all of it baking under rotor wash. A downed Huey in the A Shau Valley didn't just sit there waiting. The airframe corroded, sank into mud. Local forces stripped it for aluminum. Every hour an airframe stayed on the ground cost the Army money twice, once for the machine rotting in place, once for the replacement flying in from Bell's Fort Worth plant. A new UH-1 hotel ran the taxpayer roughly $240,000 in 1968. A recovered one, even badly damaged, cost between $15,000 and $40,000 to repair at Corpus Christi Army Depot. The math didn't require a Pentagon accountant. Fly out, hook up, drag it home, fix it, send it back to the line. The alternative, abandoning a $250,000 aircraft in a rice paddy, struck the logisticians at USARV headquarters in Long Bin as professionally offensive, so they formalized the mission. Pipe smoke tasking came down through the 234th Transportation Company, and later the 242nd Assault Support Helicopter Company, both operating CH-47s out of bases across 2 and 3 Corps. A recovery crew typically ran 5, 2 pilots, a flight engineer, a crew chief, and a rigger whose entire job consisted of riding the cargo hook down on a jungle penetrator, attaching the sling load in hostile terrain, and riding it back up. The rigger position carried no formal MOS. The after-action files from 67th Maintenance Battalion list these men by name, but not by specialty. Sources conflict on whether they volunteered or drew short straws. The cost per sortie numbers tell a story the Army preferred to keep quiet at the time. A single pipe smoke recovery sortie burned roughly 460 gallons of JP4 and averaged 2.3 flight hours. Fuel, crew pay, maintenance man-hours, and amortized airframe cost put each sortie around $2,200. Against a recovered Huey, valued at $240,000, the return on investment ran better than 100 to 1. Declassified USARV logistics summaries from 1970 show that Chinook recovery operations across Vietnam returned airframes worth $612 million to service in that fiscal year alone. The entire CH-47 fleet in country cost roughly $90 million to operate annually. The helicopter the Army called too big kept paying for everything around it. 4 M60 machine guns, 2 20mm cannons, a 40mm grenade launcher, and a 19-round rocket pod, all bolted onto a cargo helicopter. The CH-47, guns a-go-go, looked like something a bored sergeant sketched on a napkin during a bar argument about what would happen if you armed a school bus. Boeing modified 4 CH-47 Alphas at Vung Tau in '65 under a program the Army designated armed/armored CH-47. The name Guns A-Go-Go came from the crews themselves, borrowed from a 1965 television variety show called Shindig A-Go-Go that half the company watched on Armed Forces television. The connection between a dance program and a flying arsenal made exactly 0 sense, which suited the air crews fine. At Bong Sun and along Route 19, these 4 ships flew close air support that no attack helicopter in the inventory could match. A Cobra carried roughly 1,000 pounds of ordnance. A Guns A-Go-Go Chinook carried nearly 5,000 and loitered for hours while doing it. The crews hung around contested fire bases so long they started slinging cases of Budweiser on the cargo hook to troops below between gun runs. Cold beer, delivered under fire, from a helicopter bristling with cannons. The after-action reports don't mention the beer. The veterans do. 3 of the 4 were destroyed. Easy money, cost of living, birth control, all shot down or damaged beyond repair between '66 and '68. Stump Jumper survived. The losses killed the program. 4 aircraft, 3 lost, a 75% attrition rate. The Army pulled the concept and never revisited it. On paper, the decision looks obvious, but the surviving mission logs from 1st Cavalry Division show those 4 ships flew more than 800 sorties and broke every fire support response metric the division tracked. The air crews who flew them requested the assignment. The records are clear on that point. 10,471. That's the number of aircraft recovered by CH-47s in Vietnam between 1965 and 1972, according to the final USARV Logistics Closeout Report, declassified in 1975. The report uses the phrase, "no other airframe capable," their phrase, not mine, 11 separate times across 42 pages. No other airframe capable of the lift or the hover ceiling. No other airframe capable of sustaining operations in the density-altitude conditions of the Central Highlands during monsoon season. The Sikorsky CH-54 Skycrane handled some of the heavier recoveries, but the Skycrane couldn't carry troops, couldn't haul artillery, couldn't resupply a firebase, and couldn't do any of it in the same afternoon. The Chinook did all 4 before lunch and went back for the downed Huey after. Beyond recovery, the raw sortie counts border on absurd. A single CH-47 from the 228th Assault Support Helicopter Battalion logged 9,600 flight hours in 4 years without a transmission replacement. The T-55 engines ran an average of 1,200 hours between overhauls. Maintenance man-hours per flight hour held steady at roughly 22, compared to 34 for the CH-54 and 41 for the CH-53 in Marine service. Cost per flight hour in 1970 dollars came to approximately $480. The Skycrane ran north of 700. Every replacement program the Army floated through the 70s and 80s. The heavy lift helicopter program, the JVX tiltrotor concept, 3 separate Boeing proposals for a clean sheet successor, died in committee, in budget fights, or in prototype testing. The Chinook kept flying. The Delta model arrived in '82, the Foxtrot in 2014. Block 2 upgrades continue into the 2030s. One airframe design, 7 decades of continuous production. On the morning of March 15, 1971, a pipe smoke crew from the 242nd recovered a shot-up UH-1 hotel from a clearing 3 kilometers southwest of Firebase Marianne. Small arms fire punched through the Chinook's belly during the hookup. The rigger, a specialist 4 named Danny Reeves from Tulsa, rode the penetrator down, attached the 4-point sling with rounds snapping through the canopy above him, and rode it back up with his hands bleeding from cable friction because his gloves had torn on the first descent. The recovered Huey flew again 6 weeks later. Reeves received no decoration for the mission. The after-action report lists it as routine. There's that word again. No helicopter in the Western inventory has ever replaced the CH-47, not once in 60 years. The Army tried 5 times. Each attempt produced a study, a proposal, occasionally a mock-up. None produced a flying aircraft. At Ridgeway Hall in Fort Novosel, the museum Chinook sits on a concrete pad between a Cobra and a Loach. The placard lists tail numbers 6619098. General Peter Gruenwald, who commanded the 242nd in '69, wrote in his 1992 memoir that recovery crews treated the Chinook the way infantrymen treated the M2, ugly, heavy, older than anyone flying it, and completely irreplaceable. He meant it as praise. The Chinook crews took it that way. The Foxtrot model flying today carries the same tandem rotor configuration Frank Piasecki patented in 1945. The transmission is different, and the engines produce triple the shaft horsepower. The avionics belong to a different century, but the cargo hook underneath, the one Danny Reeves rode into a firefight in '71, performs the same function at the same station on the airframe. Boeing's current spec sheet lists the center hook capacity at 26,000 pounds. A UH-60 Blackhawk weighs 11,500 empty. A Chinook can carry 2 of them simultaneously, one on the center hook and one on the aft, and still make 80 knots in forward flight. The recovery mission that built the Chinook's reputation in Vietnam remains its primary-secondary tasking in every theater the Army operates today: Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, the Horn of Africa. No other rotary wing platform in NATO performs it. The British tried with their Merlins. The load limits didn't work. They bought Chinooks instead. The USARV Logistics Closeout Report that documented 10,471 recoveries carried the classification Secret No-Foreign until 1975. It sat in the National Archives at College Park, Maryland, under Record Group 550, Entry A1, Box 47, for 30 years before a graduate student at Ohio State pulled it for a dissertation. The cover page bears a coffee ring and a stamped date of April 11, 1973. Somebody initialed the routing slip in blue ballpoint. The initials are illegible.